Also prohibited will be the act of solicitation to convert religion, when it's done directly to a person, whether that be face-to-face or by any other means of communication. Wow, talk about chutzpah. This bill is designed specifically to muzzle all believers from talking about Jesus in the very land where Jesus walked and served and did his ministry. As Palm Sunday and Easter approach, the two most sacred days on the calendar of those of us who follow Jesus as both God and Messiah, two members of the Israeli Knesset, Israel's parliament, introduced a bill last week that would ban any and all efforts to tell people about Jesus. What's more, the bill would actually send violators to prison. Now, I know this seems hard to believe, but it's true. In fact, you can read a professional English translation of the full bill by going to All Israel News. It's our top story tonight, as it's been much of this week. You can also go to All Israel News to read the original text of the bill in Hebrew, if you like, and you're better in Hebrew than I am. But here are the basics. The proposed legislation would outlaw all efforts by people of one faith who want to, in any way, discuss or try to persuade people of other faiths to consider changing their current religious beliefs. The punishment for doing so would be 1 year in prison. In fact, if the conversation is with a minor, someone under the age of 18, the punishment would be 2 years imprisonment. The bill would apply to people having spiritual conversations with Israelis of any religion. However, in their official explanation of the bill, the two Israeli legislators who authored it specifically warn that it is especially important to them to stop Christians. Indeed, it's clear that their primary objective is to make it illegal for followers of Jesus, Yeshua in Hebrew, to explain why we believe that Jesus is both Messiah and God, with the hopes that Israelis might at least consider following him. But the bill does not simply make it a crime to have a personal conversation about Jesus with another individual. The text also makes it clear that it would be illegal for someone, quote, who solicits a person directly, digitally, by mail, or online in order to convert his religion, unquote. Thus, producing and publishing online videos explaining the gospel to Jewish or Muslim people in Israel and to those of any other religious faiths would suddenly become illegal. Apparently, so would publishing books, other printed literature, online articles, podcasts, or other forms of media that explain the life and ministry of Jesus and his message that is found in the New Testament. So would discussing the gospel message with people, even when you're answering questions initiated by people who don't follow Jesus, via emails, text messages, written letters, and or on social media. Now, to be clear, it's already a crime in Israel to try to proselytize or coerce or deceive minors into changing their faith. It's also a crime already to try to bribe people in Israel with money or material goods, to give them some sort of material inducement to change their religious views. Good. These should be crimes. Jesus and his apostles never taught us to try to force people to accept the gospel. The Bible, both the Hebrew scriptures and the New Testament, are crystal clear. We're supposed to love our neighbors as ourselves. We're not supposed to lie to people or try to coerce or deceive or force them into doing anything, especially when it comes to God. But we are supposed to make sure that everyone at least has the opportunity to hear the good news, to understand why Jesus is, in fact, the Messiah that we've been waiting for, and that he is, in fact, our God and Savior, and to understand what Jesus meant when he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. As the Apostle Paul put it, how are they supposed to call on the one of whom they have not heard? And how are they supposed to hear unless someone tells them? Now, everyone has the right to freely make his or her own decision to receive Jesus as Messiah and Lord of your life or to reject him forever. But everyone also has the right to understand the choice that God sets before us. Okay? But this new legislation seeks to go much further than simply reaffirming the already illegal nature of bribery or coercion. Okay? Let me quote another part of the text. Quote, "At times, these attempts to persuade someone to change his or her religious views, do not involve monetary promises or material gains and are therefore not illegal according to the current law," the bill's authors note. But then they go on to write, "But the many negative repercussions of this type of discussion, including psychological damages, warrant the intervention of the legislature." Then they go on, "Therefore, it is proposed that alongside the prohibition of giving favors as an incentive to convert religion, also prohibited will be the act of solicitation to convert religion when it's done directly to a person, whether that be face-to-face or by any other means of communication." Wow. Talk about chutzpah. This bill is designed specifically to muzzle all believers from talking about Jesus in the very land where Jesus walked and served and did his ministry. So who are the authors of this legislation? Well, they're both ultra-Orthodox Jewish members of the Knesset. They're both members of United Torah Judaism, UTJ, a Haredi, highly religious political party that currently holds 7 seats in the Knesset. And they're both influential voices and important votes inside the 64-seat governing coalition of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. One of the authors is Moshe Gafni. He's 70 years old. He was first elected to the parliament, to the Knesset, in 1988, and he's served almost continuously since then. Today, he serves as the chairman of the Knesset's powerful Finance Committee, as well as a member of the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee and the Joint Committee for the Defense Budget. The other author is Yaakov Asher. He's 57. He was first elected to Parliament in 2013, and today he serves as chairman of the Knesset's Internal Affairs and Environment Committee. Now, Gafni, Moshe Gafni, the one I first mentioned, he has a long history of opposing followers of Jesus in numerous ways. He actually first introduced legislation to impose a legal ban on evangelism here in Israel back in 1999. Back then, his bill went nowhere. But Gafni has repeatedly reintroduced versions of his legislation ever since. But now let's ask the most critical question. Can this thing actually pass and become the law of the land? Well, I hope not. But the hard truth is, yes, in the current political environment, there is a possibility that this thing could become law. Let me explain why the bill could gain traction inside the current Knesset, but also why I'm hopeful that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will ultimately put a stop to this. Okay, now first, let's state the obvious. Should this bill gain traction inside the Knesset and begin moving towards final passage, it's going to create a major new headache for the Netanyahu government. Why? Because it's going to spark a serious clash with evangelical Christians in the United States and around the world who are among the biggest supporters of the state of Israel. In the United States alone, there are some 60 million evangelicals, and most are very passionate about their love for Israel. Globally, there are an estimated 600 million evangelicals, according to the World Evangelical Alliance. Does Israel really want to trigger a global fight with 600 million evangelicals? I certainly hope not. The bill could also draw sharp criticism from both Republicans and Democrats in Congress, in the White House and the executive branch, among U.S. governors, and among other government officials and other people in Europe, South America, Africa, and Asia who love Israel and have always stood faithfully with the Jewish state, but would fiercely oppose any and all efforts to silence the followers of Jesus right here in the Holy Land. Take, for example, Sam Brownback. Brownback was the former U.S. ambassador for international religious freedom during the Trump-Pence administration. He was recruited and appointed by President Trump, Vice President Pence, and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to protect, defend, and advance religious freedom all over the globe, since religious freedom was a top priority of the Trump-Pence administration. Now, Brownback was perfect for the job since he actually wrote the legislation creating the job back when he was a U.S. Senator. Sam is a longtime and consistent friend and supporter of Israel, and he happens to be a longtime friend of mine. And now he's become the first American leader to publicly warn that this new bill poses a massive threat to free speech, human rights, and religious freedom. Last week, I sent the ambassador a copy of the bill. Surprised and concerned, he immediately, after reading it, wrote back the following statement, quote, "Free and democratic countries simply do not outlaw the free exchange of ideas, and that includes religious beliefs and convictions," said Ambassador Brownback. He continued, "Article 18 of the Universal Charter of Human Rights, which Israel has signed on to, guarantees freedom of religion, including the right to decide your own faith beliefs," unquote. Amen. Sam, God bless you. You're the first person to speak out, but I believe we're going to see more in the coming days. And that's one reason that I'm encouraged. But here's a second reason. To his credit, Prime Minister Netanyahu has never allowed such legislation to advance or to be approved on his watch, nor has his center-right Likud party. Why? Because Bibi and most, if not all, members of the Likud party have always demonstrated that they are adamant about preserving and protecting the Jewish state as a liberal democracy. And I don't mean liberal in terms of, crazy, nutty progressivism. I'm talking about, a real, true Western democracy. And Netanyahu and Likud have always believed that even unpopular views must be allowed to be held and voiced in Israel, and that the rights of religious and ethnic minorities must be protected under the rule of law. Netanyahu and Likud have therefore rejected such explicit breaches of freedom of speech, blatant violations of religious freedom, and aggressive assaults on fundamental human rights. What's more, Netanyahu has proven himself over the past 3 decades to be a great and loyal friend of evangelical Christians. Now, Bibi doesn't agree theologically with us on who Jesus is. Netanyahu's Jewish, and he's the Prime Minister of Israel. But Netanyahu has long viewed the evangelical community as a true blessing and as a strategic asset to the state of Israel and to the Jewish people worldwide. And that's why ever since he entered government service back in the early 1990s, Netanyahu has actively and consistently courted and cultivated strong support for Israel among evangelical Christians. Netanyahu meets regularly with Christian leaders from a wide range of denominations. He often speaks at Christian conferences and forums, including at the Christian Media Summit that the Prime Minister's office holds every year here in Jerusalem and is organized by the Israeli government press office. I've attended, I've even spoken at that several times, as of course Netanyahu has. Just last year, I brought a delegation of evangelical business and media leaders to meet with Netanyahu at the Knesset. And during his book tour several months ago, Netanyahu spoke numerous times on Christian TV networks, including right here on TBN, both on Praise with Matt and Lori Crouch and on Eric Stakelback's program. Now, all that said, evangelical and Messianic Jewish leaders that I've spoken to in recent days say that they are concerned that in this present political environment, this legislation introduced by Moshe Gafni and Yaakov Asher could actually still become law. We've got breaking news on this story. Now, a few days ago, we had pre-taped this program just for some scheduling issues here in the studio. But as you may notice, I'm wearing a different suit. I'm standing rather than sitting. Why? Because I've had to rush back into the studio here just hours before this airs. Why? Because some dramatic developments have happened. So stay with me. Let me walk you through the narrative. Now, there's been great concern, as I've described through the show, that this night was not different. It was different from all other nights, meaning, yes, Netanyahu has always been good on relations with Christians, right? And building a strategic alliance and a warm relationship with the world's 2 billion Christians, and certainly with the 600 million evangelicals worldwide, but particularly with the 60 million evangelicals, many of whom are pro-Israel in the United States. So that's why many people have thought that, look, this is really not a worry, this bill moving forward. Why? Because Netanyahu would never let it move forward. However, Netanyahu's coalition this time is not the same as he's ever had before. Far more religious members of the coalition this time, and they're far more aggressive. Some of the Orthodox and certainly the Ultra-Orthodox, they're far more aggressive in trying to advance policies, laws that advance their religious point of view, their theological view, which they want to impose halakha, Jewish law, rabbinic Jewish law on the rest of the country. And not everybody's comfortable with that. So this is why there's been a grave concern among evangelical and messianic leaders here in Israel, and of course around the world, that if push came to shove, the UTJ party, the United Torah Judaism Party, might sort of play chicken with Netanyahu, saying, look, you have to let this bill move forward and even pass to silence all Christians from talking about the gospel, or we're going to bolt the coalition and then your government will collapse. UTJ has 7 seats. So Netanyahu has 64 altogether, but those 7 seats are critical, otherwise the government falls. So that's been the concern. And then if the Supreme Court judicial reforms are passed, which are highly controversial here, including the override clause, that's the most controversial provision. And that would say that if the Supreme Court strikes down a law as being against Israel's basic laws, again, we don't have a constitution, but if the Supreme Court struck down this bill or the law to gag Christians from even being able to talk about their faith here in Israel, this override clause would allow only 61 members of the Knesset to pass it all over again. And then it would become law, and the Supreme Court would have no jurisdiction over it, and believers here in the land would have no legal recourse whatsoever. That was the concern. Now, late Wednesday, there was breaking news. And the breaking news was that Prime Minister Netanyahu issued a statement on Twitter saying that we will never allow a law to be passed that would harm the Christian community, okay, that would go against the Christian community. That was a tweet that he put out at 4:43 in the afternoon. We had already shot this show. We had already edited this show, including the ending, which would just walk you through the concerns and say, hey, please pray that this bill would be stopped, that Netanyahu would stand up and stop it. He did. He did. And it was quite dramatic. And in fact, then one of the bill's authors, Moshe Gafni, issued a statement saying, okay, basically, I'm paraphrasing, but we're going to table this legislation and it's not going to go anywhere for the foreseeable future. This is a good development. It's an answer to prayer. And it turns out it all got set into motion because of the All Israel News article that we published on Sunday, where we were the first to tell people that this was out there, and we gave the actual Hebrew and English text of the bill, and we explained what the threats were, what the problem was, and this went viral. Not only did our coverage become widespread, but other Christian media outlets and then Israeli media outlets picked up the story. Some Christian media outlets literally reprinted our story. Others, quoted All Israel News and got the word out. By Wednesday morning, we've now learned, the foreign ministry here at Israel was being inundated with inquiries from Christian Zionists, from pastors, from ministry leaders all around the world, mostly the United States, but also from diplomats, from Jewish leaders. Well, what is going on? Why are we picking a fight? Why is Israel picking a fight with the world's Christian community right now? That seems like a bad idea. We've now learned through the reporting of the Times of Israel that became such a deluge of input into the foreign ministry that it went right up to the foreign minister, then went to the prime minister, and the prime minister acted. And I want to thank Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for continuing to stand with the Christian community here in Israel as he has around the world. And I want to thank you for being part of this program, because even though you didn't know about it yet, you know about it now. Keep praying. Let's stay vigilant.
Hey, I'm Mati Shoshani, and thank you for watching the TBN Israel YouTube channel. We hope this video gave you greater understanding of Israel and her people. If you haven't already, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. We'd love to hear from you, so be sure to share what you've learned and ask your questions in comments below. And invite your friends to join the conversation.